if you've been following along, we're now on Schedule E/F, which is listing your unsecured general creditors. And so I'm back on Ashley's page. I'm on Schedule E and F. And what I've done for this one, since it's a bit of a longer form, is I've gone ahead and generated a new form like we usually do, but I've gone ahead and filled in a large portion um, of Ashley's documents, just so we don't have to go through and you watch me type in the stuff that Ashley typed in. Schedule E and F, as you can see, asks you to list out your creditors who have unsecured claims. This essentially means all your creditors who don't have liens on your property. So this would include any creditors that are not already listed in your Schedule D. The first question, I've gone ahead and filled in Ashley's name and where she's filing like normal. And let's move on to part one. Part one asks, list all of your priority unsecured claims. Priority basically means what creditors do you have that are entitled to special treatment under the Bankruptcy Code. You may have to do a bit of research to figure out what types of creditors you have that may be entitled to priority treatment. These include, for example, taxes that have been unpaid, alimony that's past due and owing, as well as child support that's past due and owing. Just to give a couple examples, the Bankruptcy Code actually outlines what types of claims are entitled to priority. And so, you may need to just do a quick Google search or do a bit of research to figure out what claims are entitled to priority and do you have some sort of debt that's entitled to priority. Now, in Ashley's case, again, she's got a very simple case, like we've discussed in other videos. And so she selected no for this question. She does not have any creditors that have priority unsecured claims. And so because she doesn't, she can go ahead and move on to the next section. And so you'll see that for the remainder of part one, that's actually left blank for Ashley. And the continuation page obviously doesn't include anything either. Now, obviously, if you have creditors that are entitled to priority treatment, you would list them here, and that would include things like their name and address, the dollar amounts, the priority amount under the statute, and the non-priority amount. This is a little bit more complex, so again, this is one of those things you might, if you think you have a priority claim, if you think someone has a priority claim against you, you may want to either get someone's advice or work with someone or consult with an attorney. Again, in Ashley's case, she had a simple set of facts and she does not have any priority claims. Now here, part two, we're moving on to the non-priority unsecured claims. This is the meat of this form, I would say, and probably the meat of many of your forms because it asks you to list all of your creditors that you owe any money to. And so, you can have a number of different creditors that can include things like medical bills, lawsuits that have been filed against you, collection actions, or creditors that are trying to collect money from you. Anybody you owe money to needs to be listed here. And so you do need to do a fair amount of digging through your bills, your records, your finances to make sure you list absolutely everyone. If you don't, you may not get a discharge for the creditor that you failed to list. And this can really hamper your ability to get a fresh start. So please do your best to go through all your records. Make sure you've got absolutely everyone together that you owe money to, and make sure you list them and get their correct address and the correct amount owed and things like that. I'm going to go through what Ashley did and how she listed out her creditors to hopefully provide a starting point for you. And we'll talk about some of the things along the way that Ashley did that might provide some guidance. The first creditor she had was a creditor called Convergent Outsourcing, Inc. This was, she listed as a collection attorney for T-Mobile USA. So presumably this is her cell phone bill, and the total amount of the claim she lists at $25.28. She lists her account number as 5353. She lists when the debt was incurred, and she lists the address that she has on file for this creditor. This is all really important to make sure you get all these details right. If you don't, for whatever reason, you can file an amendment, but I think it's just a lot easier to go ahead and include everything up front correctly. You will notice that each of these sections for all of your creditors asks who incurred the debt, and that refers to who owes the money to this person or this company. In Ashley's case, she's the only debtor who's filing this case. She's not filing with a spouse jointly, and so she's going to select debtor one only for all of these. You'll see that, and it also has a box to say check if this claim is for a community debt. Ashley doesn't live in a community property state like we've discussed, and she doesn't have a spouse either. So this question, community debt, which really refers to, do you have debt that is owed jointly between two spouses, and are you in a community property state? And she's never going to select that for any of these. Likewise, is the claim subject to offset is another question that's going to be asked. I won't get into too much detail here, but essentially this asks, does this creditor also owe you money? And so do you have a situation where you have obligations going both ways? So that, for example, if Ashley was also owed money from Convergent Outsourcing, maybe Convergent Outsourcing also holds a checking account for Ashley and, is required to pay money to Ashley whenever Ashley withdraws money from her checking account. That would be a situation where maybe this claim is subject to offset because Convergent Outsourcing actually holds money for Ashley. Ashley owes this amount to Convergent Outsourcing. In Ashley's case, again, this is a really simple case. She's not going to have none of these claims are going to be subject to offset, and she's going to select no. So let's move through some of the other debts that she lists and see how she does it. Her second one is to a creditor called Credit Acceptance. Again, she lists the address, the account number. It appears that she wasn't aware of when this debt actually was incurred. In other words, when did the obligation arise? When did she actually start to owe money to this person or this company? And in this case, she couldn't recall, so she left that blank. This is the total amount, and she lists other as a lawsuit. Generally, on all of these, she's going to select other and specify what it is that this debt refers to. If it's student loans, if it's obligations from a divorce decree or separation agreement, or if it's debts for a pension or profit sharing plan, you would select those options. But those are a bit more the exception to the rule, I think. And so she always selects other. Moving on, she's got debts for her. This appears to be her internet or maybe her cable services. And so she lists that, and she lists their address and the amount. She's also got, a collection attorney who's pursuing her for amounts owed for her. It looks like DirecTV, which is probably her cable provider, and that total amount listed here. And you'll also note that it asks to number these sequentially. So it starts with 4.1 goes up, and so you just keep numbering them, 4.4, 4.5, and so on. And it also asks that you do it alphabetically. So, once you've collected all of your creditors in one pile, you can sort them alphabetically and list their details here alphabetically, like Ashley's done. Moving on, we've got a creditor called Easy Money. This is probably a payday loan. And so she lists loan and what she always lists, which is debtor one only, not subject to offset. Again, if you can't remember, when it was incurred, or maybe the account doesn't have an account number, that's not something to, get in a huge fuss over. She just left that blank. And you'll note here, 4.6, she lists an installment sales contract, and she lists $0 for this creditor. And, I'm not exactly sure why she did that. Maybe her attorney told her to just list everyone under the sun just to make sure everybody's covered. and maybe this debt was actually transferred to another company to collect, and so that's why she listed it at 0, and she's probably going to list it later on, you know, in another creditor's name. Then we've got what appears to be medical bills, and so it looks like Medicine PC Eastern Hospital. Maybe she incurred some medical bills for treatment that she got, and so she lists the creditor, the account numbers, and you'll note, these creditors are the same. We've got 3 in a row that are the same creditors, but they've actually provided different account numbers, and so she lists that separately, which is probably a good practice. And then this is presumably who the Finger Hut debt was assigned to, LVNV Funding, with a separate account number and a total amount of claim. Moving on, we've got looks like a collection attorney for an apartment complex. So maybe she could have potentially guaranteed, a friend's lease, or a relative's lease, or she had a lease and she broke it and couldn't afford to pay for it, and so she lists the collection agency, which is National Credit Systems, that are trying to collect this amount of debt for that lease. And so she lists, you'll see she lists here the name of the apartment complex, and that they filed a lawsuit against her, and that $0 is owing to this entity at this point, but that debt, it looks like, has been transferred over to National Credit Systems, who's actually trying to collect from her. So you can see, it's probably a good practice to list absolutely anybody, even if you don't have, even if they're not owed money because someone else is trying to collect, it's probably a good practice to list everybody you can think of that you owe money to. And so that's it. She's got 12. She's got 12 creditors that she lists. I went ahead and included in the original form, I included a couple extra pages, just in case you have extra creditors you need to list. I found that the basic form that the U.S. Courts website provides is pretty inadequate in terms of how many spaces it leaves to list all your creditors. I think it only leaves room for, probably like 8 creditors, which is probably less than many people have. So she doesn't have any more than 12, and so she's going to leave these sections blank. And so we can move on to part 3, and that asks to list others to be notified about a debt that you already listed. And so this would be, for example, you've got a collection agency who's trying to collect a debt that you actually owe to someone else. The debt hasn't actually been transferred. They've just hired a law firm or a collection agency to try to get this money from you. And in this case, the creditor, which was, 4.2, Credit Acceptance was the real name of the creditor. And they actually hired a law firm, Zarzar and Swartz, to try to collect that debt. And so this is what this part is asking you to do. List anybody else who needs to be notified that you're filing bankruptcy. And so she lists that here. If you have other creditor, or if you have other collection agencies or law firms who are, trying to collect money from you, you would list them here as well. This is, important because it tells this entity not to continue harassing you or continue trying to collect money from you once you've filed your bankruptcy. If they're not listed and, they don't get notice of the bankruptcy, they're probably going to continue trying to collect money from you. So this is important to make sure you list everybody, including any collection agencies or attorneys that are pursuing you for money. Okay, moving on to part 4. Add the amounts for each types of unsecured claims. And so this is basically asking you to, sum up all your claims into one total amount. And so, like we've done in other schedules, we're going to list what Ashley owes in these parts. And the first thing is domestic support obligations. These are some common priority type claims that you'll see. And so one is domestic support obligations. That would include alimony and child support. The second is taxes and other debts you owe the government. And the third is claims for death or personal injury while you're intoxicated. So, for example, if you were drunk driving and you hit another car and you hurt or killed someone, this is probably going to be a priority type claim. In Ashley's case, she doesn't have any priority claims, and so she lists $0 for each of these four amounts. And so the total for her for total priority is going to be $0. Moving on, it asks, what types of regular unsecured claims do you have? And you'll recall in each of the items of claims we saw, it asks, is this a student loan? Is this related to a divorce or a separation agreement? Or is this a debt to a pension or profit sharing plan? In Ashley's case, none of these things applied, and so she filled in each of these as $0. Then it asks you to add all of your other non-priority unsecured claims. And so that was the total of everything Ashley listed above. In Ashley's case, she summed it all up, and it came out to $34,467. And then it asks you to add all of that up, which for her is quite easy because she just has $34,467. And so that's her total claims, total amount of unsecured claims. And so that's essentially that. We'll go ahead and file and save as. I'll save it in the downloads folder as Schedule E. And I can save it. I'll save it I'll replace it. Okay. And so we've saved her Schedule E. And we'll go back and select that file and upload it. And so now Ashley's got, once this uploads, there we go. Now Ashley is saved and uploaded her Schedule E, and she's ready to move on to the next item. And so we'll see you back for Schedule G, which is the next schedule. Thanks, and see you soon.